Judge Martinez's gavel slammed the bench like a gunshot. Mr. Holbrook, the court hereby awards you full permanent ownership of the $180,000 luxury residential addition built without permission on your property, plus $47,000 in attorney fees and court costs, payable immediately by the defendants. Dead silence. Then Richard Pemberton, my smug HOA president, turned the color of printer paper. His wife let out a choked sob when she realized their brand-new custom kitchen, the one with the $18,000 Italian marble island and the built-in Miele espresso bar, now legally belonged to the crazy old man they'd spent 8 months trying to bully out of the neighborhood. The court clerk stamped my updated deed. Thunk. The sound hit harder than the gavel. Pemberton tried to stand. His knees buckled. He collapsed straight to the floor, right between the tables, gasping like a fish while his lawyer frantically fanned him with a legal folder. His wife was screaming my name through hysterical tears as if I were the villain here. 8 months of fake violations, threats, and lies ended with me owning their dream addition and them owing me a check most people don't make in a year. Turns out the quickest way to get a free luxury kitchen remodel is to let your HOA president teach you a lesson about property lines. I walked out smiling, keys to their masterpiece already in my hand. 6 months ago, I thought retirement meant peace and quiet. After Linda died from cancer and I'd spent 30 years surveying property lines for Metro County, dealing with boundary disputes between neighbors who acted like kindergartners, Willowbrook Estates looked like paradise. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, HOA brochure promising maintaining property values through rigorous community standards. What could possibly go wrong? The moving truck pulled away on a Tuesday morning in March. I was 61 years old, officially done with measuring other people's problems, ready for a simple life. Maybe grow some vegetables, read mystery novels without my phone buzzing at dawn about fence disputes, fix things around the house at my own pace. My surveying equipment went into the garage. Old habits die hard, and I still took occasional consulting jobs when property lawyers needed expert witnesses. 30 years of experience doesn't just disappear because you retire. The equipment was organized, professional, nothing commercial about it. 3 days later, she appeared. Janet Pemberton materialized at my driveway like a HOA horror story. Blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly groceries, designer yoga pants, clipboard clutched like a weapon of suburban destruction. "Excuse me," she said, not excusing anything. "I'm Janet Pemberton, HOA secretary. My husband Richard is the president. We need to discuss your storage violation." I looked at my garage. I looked at my 2 tool cabinets, surveying equipment on proper shelves, Linda's garden supplies neatly boxed, everything visible but organized. "What storage violation?" She clicked her pen, click, and scribbled something. "Section 12.3 of Community Guidelines. Professional equipment must be concealed from street view. You have 7 days to remedy this or face $50 daily fines." She handed me a photocopied notice, not even official letterhead, and strutted away like she'd just solved world hunger. I stood there holding this piece of paper, thinking about Linda. She would have laughed until she cried. "Marcus," she'd have said, "you moved to suburbia to escape property disputes and they started one in your driveway before you unpacked the dishes." That evening I walked the neighborhood to get oriented. Willowbrook Estates was built in 1987 on former farmland. I actually remembered when this area was surveyed for development. 43 houses, each on exactly 0. 23 acres according to the original subdivision plat, rolling hills, decent drainage, good sight lines for construction. Most neighbors seemed normal. The Washingtons next door were retired teachers who waved from their front porch. Across the street, Mike Rodriguez was a detective with Metro PD. We talked about his vegetable garden and swapped stories about dealing with difficult people, quiet folks who minded their own business. Then I met Richard Pemberton. His house dominated the corner lot, easily twice the size of mine, with elaborate landscaping that probably cost more than my annual pension. Richard answered the door wearing golf clothes that screamed, "I have money and want you to know it." "You must be our new neighbor." His handshake was too firm, too long, like a politician working a crowd. "Richard Pemberton, HOA president. Hope Janet explained our community standards. We work very hard to maintain property values here." She mentioned storage guidelines. "Exactly. See, Marcus, can I call you Marcus? We've built something special in Willowbrook. Property values up 18% over 5 years. But that only works if everyone follows the same rules, maintains the same standards. Behind him, I could see marble floors, furniture that belonged in a magazine, the kind of kitchen renovation that costs more than most people's cars. This wasn't a guy worried about $50 HOA dues or property values. This was about control. Makes sense, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Good, good. Now, I should mention, I'm expanding my entertainment area this summer, adding a covered patio with full outdoor kitchen. City approved it. HOA unanimously approved it. Very exciting project. He gestured toward his backyard with obvious pride. Might be some construction noise, but it'll add significant value to the whole neighborhood. No problem. I like seeing people improve their properties. That smile got wider, more predatory. I knew you'd understand. Most folks around here appreciate progress. It's only the difficult residents who cause problems. Walking home, I replayed that conversation. Something felt off about the way he emphasized city approved and HOA approved. In 30 years of surveying, I'd learned that people only over-explain permits when they're worried about something. Plus that comment about difficult residents. Was that a warning? But I was retired. Not my problem. Live and let live. I spent the weekend reorganizing my garage, moving surveying equipment to a back corner where it wasn't visible from the street. Technically compliant with their ridiculous rule. The violation notice disappeared from my mailbox Monday morning. No acknowledgement, no thank you, just gone. 2 weeks later, I was settling into retirement routine. Morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening reading. Quiet suburban life, exactly what I'd wanted after decades of chaos. That's when I decided to plant tomatoes in my backyard. That decision changed absolutely everything. Saturday morning, April 15th. Perfect weather for starting my garden. I'd already sketched out where the tomatoes would go, southeast corner of my backyard where they'd get full morning sun. Linda always said I was obsessive about planning, but 30 years of surveying teaches you to measure twice, dig once. I grabbed my old measuring tape and headed outside to stake out the garden plot. That's when I heard the machinery. Beep, beep, beep. An excavator was backing up somewhere close, engine rumbling like thunder. I figured someone was putting in a pool or expanding their driveway. Willowbrook Estates was full of home improvement projects. I walked toward the back fence to avoid the noise and started measuring my garden space. 20 feet from the house, 10 feet wide, perfect rectangle. I was hammering in the first stake when I realized the excavator sounds were coming from directly behind me. That's impossible, I thought. Behind me was just my backyard and then the property line. I walked to my back fence and looked over. What I saw made my blood pressure spike about 40 points. A construction crew was digging a foundation, not just digging, but actively pouring concrete footings for what looked like a major addition. The excavator was parked squarely in what should have been my backyard, chewing up earth that belonged to me. "Hey!" I called to the foreman. "Excuse me." He looked up from his clipboard, pulled out one earbud. "Yeah? Whose property are you working on?" "Pemberton job. Adding a covered patio and outdoor kitchen." He gestured to a set of plans rolled up on his truck. "You got a problem?" I did some quick visual measurements. The concrete truck was sitting at least 8 feet past where the property line should be, maybe 10 feet. The excavator had dug the foundation hole completely onto my side of the boundary. "Can I see those plans?" The foreman shrugged and unrolled them. Sure enough, Pemberton Residence, Outdoor Entertainment Addition. But the dimensions showed the addition extending 24 feet from the existing house foundation. If Pemberton's house sat where I thought it did, that would put 12 feet of his new structure on my property. "This foundation you're digging," I said carefully, "how far does it extend from the house?" 24 feet like the plans show. Why?" My hands were shaking slightly, not from anger, not yet, but from the professional shock of seeing a boundary violation this blatant. "Because you're building on my land." The foreman looked at me like I'd announced I was from Mars. "Buddy, we got permits. City approved everything. HOA signed off. You got a problem? Take it up with the homeowner." That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. I walked straight to Pemberton's front door and rang the bell. Ding dong! Through the frosted glass I could see movement, hear muffled voices. Janet answered, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Marcus, what brings you by on a Saturday?" "Need to speak with Richard about his construction project," she called over her shoulder. "Honey, the neighbor wants to talk about your patio." Richard appeared, still in golf clothes, holding a Bloody Mary with extra celery. weekend relaxation mode. His smile was practiced, political. Marcus, exciting day, right? Finally breaking ground on the entertainment area. Going to be spectacular. 1,200 square feet of covered space, full outdoor kitchen, built-in grill station. Really going to boost the whole neighborhood's property values. Richard, I think there might be a boundary issue. His smile flickered for exactly 1 second. Then it returned, brighter and more condescending. Boundary issue? Marcus, I appreciate your concern, but everything's been professionally surveyed. City Planning Department reviewed the entire project. HOA Architectural Committee gave unanimous approval. He took a sip of his drink. Trust me, we crossed every T and dotted every I. The construction crew is digging on my property. Well now, that's quite an accusation. His voice stayed friendly, but something cold entered his eyes. You know, Marcus, property lines can be confusing for people who aren't familiar with development regulations. What looks like encroachment to an untrained eye is often just standard setback measurements. Janet stepped closer to her husband. Richard works very closely with the City Planning Office. He's on the Zoning Review Board, the Architectural Standards Committee. He knows exactly where property lines are. The way she said it, like I was some confused old man who didn't understand how things worked. I surveyed properties for 30 years, I said quietly. Different era, different standards, Richard replied, waving his hand dismissively. Modern development has much more sophisticated measurement techniques. Plus, HOA covenants can supersede individual property interpretations when it benefits the community. That sentence hit me like a slap. HOA covenants superseding property rights? That's not how property law works. That's not how any of this works. Richard, property lines aren't interpretations. They're legal boundaries. Marcus, his smile turned pitying. I understand you're trying to be helpful, but questioning city-approved construction projects can create unnecessary complications for everyone involved. Sometimes it's better to trust the professionals and let progress happen. The threat was subtle but clear. Challenge this, and there would be consequences. I nodded politely and walked away. But my mind was already working. Monday morning, I was in my garage by 7 a.m. pulling out equipment I hadn't touched in 6 months. My Trimble GPS unit, still in its protective case. Steel survey stakes, orange flagging tape, the 300-foot measuring chain I'd used for boundary disputes across 3 counties. Time to do this properly. Professional land surveying isn't guesswork. It's math, GPS coordinates, and legal descriptions that hold up in court. After 30 years, I could run a boundary survey in my sleep. First step, find the original survey markers for my lot. Every subdivided property has iron pins driven into the ground at the corners, usually buried under years of landscaping, but they're always there. I started at my front corner, sweeping with a metal detector until I heard that familiar beep, 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 dug down 8 inches and found the iron pin exactly where the 1987 subdivision plat said it would be. Got you. Corner 2, southeast edge of my property. Another iron pin, this one partially exposed by erosion. I marked it with flagging tape and took GPS readings with my Trimble unit, accurate to within 3 inches. Corner 3, back of my lot, where it should meet Pemberton's property line. This is where things got interesting. According to the county records, my property ran 150 feet deep from the street. I measured from my front pin, 148 feet, 149 feet, 150 feet exactly. Drove a temporary stake and took GPS coordinates. Then I looked at Pemberton's construction project. The concrete foundation they'd poured Saturday was sitting 12 feet past my survey stake, 12 full feet onto my property. His outdoor entertainment area wasn't close to the property line, it was completely across it. But that wasn't the worst part. I walked the full boundary between our lots, measuring and marking every 20 feet. What I discovered made my hands shake with professional outrage. Pemberton's addition wasn't just encroaching on my land, it was designed to encroach. The architectural plans clearly showed a 24-foot extension from his house foundation. But his house sat only 12 feet from the actual property line. He knew. He had to know. I spent 3 hours documenting everything. GPS coordinates, digital photographs, measurements cross-referenced with the original subdivision plat. By noon, I had enough evidence to stop this project cold. That's when Detective Rodriguez walked over from across the street. Marcus, what's all the surveying equipment about? You working again? Boundary dispute. Neighbors building on my property. Mike looked at the stakes, the foundation, the obvious encroachment. 20 years in law enforcement teaches you to recognize when something's not right. Jesus, that's not even close. How much are we talking? 12 feet deep, 24 feet wide, about 288 square feet of my land. What's that worth? I did quick math. Property values in Willowbrook ran about $180 per square foot for developed land, around $50,000. Before you factor in the structure they're building on it, Mike whistled low. That's felony-level theft if it's intentional. Oh, it's intentional. You talked to Pemberton yet? Saturday, he claims city approval supersedes property lines. That's bullshit and he knows it. Mike studied the survey stakes, then the foundation. Marcus, I can't officially get involved in a civil property dispute, but unofficially, document everything. And I mean everything. Guys like Pemberton count on people being too intimidated to fight back. That afternoon, I compiled my survey results into a formal report. GPS coordinates, boundary calculations, photographic evidence, references to the original subdivision plat recorded with Metro County in 1987. 15 pages of data that would hold up in any courtroom. Then I walked to my computer and started researching property law. Specifically, what happens when someone builds permanent improvements on land they don't own. What I found made me smile for the first time in days. Turns out, when you build on someone else's property, you don't just owe them damages. Under certain circumstances, you might accidentally give them the entire structure. Time to educate Mr. Pemberton about accession law. Tuesday morning, I found 3 different violation notices taped to my front door. Not slipped into the mailbox like normal HOA correspondence, taped directly to the door where everyone could see them. Public humiliation tactics. Notice number 1. Unauthorized surveying equipment visible from street view, $50 daily, fine effective immediately. Notice no 2. Unapproved landscaping modification. Survey stakes constitute temporary structures requiring architectural approval, $75 daily fine. Notice number 3. Harassment of approved construction crews. Cease and desist all interference with community improvement projects. $100 daily fine until compliance verified. I stood there reading these notices, doing the math. $225 per day in fines for documenting that my neighbor was stealing my land. The irony was so thick you could pour it on pancakes. The phone rang as I walked inside. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Holbrook? This is David Tatum from Pemberton Development Group. Mr. Pemberton asked me to give you a call about your concerns regarding the Willowbrook construction project. Pemberton Development Group. So Richard wasn't just HOA president, he was running construction projects through his own company, using HOA approval to rubber stamp his own development work. The corruption was deeper than I'd thought. What can I do for you, Mr. Tatum? Well, Mr. Pemberton wanted to address this situation before it gets out of hand. He understands you have questions about property boundaries, and he's prepared to be very reasonable. He could offer a small adjustment to the project scope, maybe pull the foundation back a couple feet, in exchange for your cooperation going forward. Cooperation with what? Withdrawing any formal complaints, removing the survey equipment, allowing the project to proceed without further documentation. Mr. Pemberton values neighborhood harmony. He's even prepared to waive those HOA fines as a gesture of good faith. I let that sink in. Pemberton was offering to pull back a couple of feet from property he'd stolen 12 feet of, like a bank robber offering to return half the money. Mr. Tatum, your client is building on my land without permission. That's not a negotiation. It's theft. Long pause. Mr. Holbrook, I think you might be misunderstanding the legal situation here. Mr. Pemberton has city permits, HOA approval, and professional surveyor certification for this project. Challenging legitimate construction could expose you to significant liability. Liability for what? Interference with permitted construction, defamation of a licensed contractor, frivolous boundary claims. The legal fees alone could be substantial, especially for someone on a fixed retirement income. The threat couldn't have been clearer: back down or get buried in legal costs. I'll consider your offer, I said, and hung up. 20 minutes later, Janet Pemberton knocked on my door. This time she brought backup, 2 other women I recognized from neighborhood walks but had never met. Marcus, we need to talk. Janet's clipboard was out, pen poised for battle. The HOA board has received multiple complaints about your disruptive behavior. Disruptive behavior? The woman to her left stepped forward. Susan Walsh from Maple Street. You've been harassing construction workers, interfering with an approved community improvement project. People are concerned about property values. The third woman nodded vigorously. Lisa Tatum from Oak Lane. My husband had to take personal time from work to address your frivolous complaints. This affects the whole community. Wait. Lisa Tatum. David Tatum. This was getting incestuous fast. Ladies, I'm documenting a boundary violation. You're creating drama where none exists, Janet interrupted. Richard has bent over backwards to accommodate your concerns. He offered to modify the project, waive your fines, even include you in the planning process going forward, but you seem determined to cause problems. Susan Walsh pulled out her phone and started recording. Are you refusing to cooperate with the HOA board's reasonable resolution attempts? Are you recording this conversation? Community meetings are subject to documentation per HOA bylaws, Lisa Tatum said, reading from her own phone. Your refusal to engage constructively is being noted for the record. I realized what was happening. They were building a case for escalated enforcement action, recording my uncooperative behavior to justify whatever came next. I need to speak with an attorney before any further discussions, I said. Janet's smile turned predatory. That's certainly your right, though I should mention that HOA liens for unpaid fines can accumulate very quickly. We're currently at $450 in outstanding violations plus $50 daily compounding. By Friday, you'll owe over $800. At 30 days, we're authorized to begin foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure? Standard HOA enforcement. When residents refuse to comply with community standards and accumulate significant fine debt, the association has legal authority to place liens and, if necessary, foreclose to recover costs. She flipped through her clipboard. It's all clearly outlined in the covenants you signed when you purchased your home. I felt my chest tighten. I'd bought this house to enjoy retirement, and 3 weeks later they were threatening foreclosure over fines for documenting theft. The easiest solution, Susan Walsh said, still recording, is simple cooperation. Remove the survey equipment, stop interfering with approved construction, accept Mr. Pemberton's generous boundary adjustment offer. This all goes away. What about the 12 feet of my property he's already built on? Alleged boundary discrepancy, Lisa Tatum corrected, unsubstantiated by any city-approved surveyor. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at those violation notices. In 3 days, Pemberton had escalated from friendly dismissal to legal threats to foreclosure proceedings. The message was clear: accept the theft or lose my house. That's when I called Sarah Tatum. No relation to David or Lisa Tatum, thankfully. Sarah was a property attorney I'd worked with on boundary disputes over the years. Time to lawyer up. Because if Pemberton wanted to play hardball, he'd just challenge someone with 30 years of experience playing for keeps. Sarah Tatum's law office was a converted Victorian house downtown, all hardwood floors and legal books that actually got used. I'd worked with Sarah on boundary disputes for 15 years. She was sharp, thorough, and had zero tolerance for HOA bullying. Marcus, this is fascinating. She spread my survey documentation across her conference table. 12 feet of encroachment, documented with GPS coordinates, cross-referenced with the original subdivision plat. This is textbook boundary violation. The question is, what can we do about it? Several options. Injunctive relief to stop construction, lawsuit for trespass and damages, or... She paused, studying the survey measurements. Something more interesting. More interesting how? Tell me about the construction timeline. How much have they built so far? Concrete foundation. Framing starts Monday. They're moving fast. Sarah pulled a thick legal book from her shelf, flipped to a bookmarked section. Texas Property Code, Section 23102. When someone builds permanent improvements on another person's land without permission, the landowner can elect to keep the improvements and pay their value or force the builder to remove them. I can keep his addition? Potentially, but there's an even better option under accession law. If the improvements are substantial and removing them would cause economic waste, courts can award ownership of the improvements to the landowner without compensation to the builder. I felt something shift in my chest. You mean he builds me a free edition and gets nothing? If we play this right, exactly that. But timing is crucial. The more he builds, the stronger our case becomes. That afternoon, I watched Pemberton's construction crew frame the addition. 24 feet by 18 feet of premium lumber, engineered to support a heavy roof. They were building quality work, on my land. Around 5 p.m., my doorbell rang. Richard Pemberton stood there alone, golf clothes replaced by an expensive business suit. His friendly mask was gone. "Marcus, we need to resolve this situation immediately." "I'm listening." "You're harassing my contractors, filing frivolous surveys, creating legal complications for a legitimate construction project. It stops now." "Your project is 12 feet onto my property." "According to an outdated survey by someone who hasn't worked professionally in 6 months." His voice was getting louder. "I have city approval, HOA approval, and a current surveyor's certificate. Your amateur measurements don't trump official permits. Those permits are based on false information about the property boundaries." "Prove it." He stepped closer, using his height to loom over me. "Take me to court. Spend your retirement savings on legal fees fighting the city planning department, the HOA board, and a licensed development company. See how that works out for a bitter old man with too much time on his hands." The mask was completely off now. This was the real Richard Pemberton, not the friendly neighbor, but the bully who'd been running Willowbrook Estates like his personal kingdom. "Richard, I documented everything. GPS coordinates, photographic evidence, cross-reference measurements. Any court will see a disgruntled retiree harassing his neighbors over imaginary boundary disputes." He pulled out his phone, showed me a video. It was me measuring property lines, talking to his construction crew, looking frustrated and argumentative. Uploaded to the neighborhood social media group 2 hours ago. "Difficult neighbor disrupting community improvement project." Already got 47 comments supporting my position. I watched the video, cleverly edited to make me look unreasonable, confrontational. Comments rolling in. Some people just want to cause drama. The HOA should fine him for harassment. Property values suffer when residents act like this. "You posted this without my permission." Public property, public street, First Amendment. His smile was vicious now. "Marcus, you're fighting a war you can't win. I have connections at City Hall, 15 years on the HOA board, and legal resources you can't match. Walk away now, accept my generous boundary adjustment offer, and this ends quietly. Keep fighting, and I'll bury you in paperwork and legal fees until you're broke." He walked away, but turned back at the driveway. "Oh, and Marcus? Those HOA fines are now at $1,200. Compounding daily. At $50,000 in unpaid violations, we're legally authorized to foreclose. Might want to consider how long you can afford your principals." That evening, I called Mike Rodriguez. 20 years in law enforcement, he understood escalation patterns. "Marcus, this guy's following the classic bully playbook. Isolation, financial pressure, reputation damage, escalating consequences. Question is, what's his end game? Keep my property, I guess." "No, think bigger. If he's running development projects through his own company and using HOA authority to approve them, this isn't about one addition. This is about a business model." Mike was right. I pulled up the Metro County permit database online, searched for Pemberton Development Group. What I found made my stomach drop. 17 different projects in the last 5 years, all in HOA-managed communities, all with Richard Pemberton on the Architectural Review Board or in HOA leadership. Pool installations, home additions, landscaping projects, millions of dollars in development work, all pre-approved by HOAs that Pemberton controlled. "Mike, I think I stumbled into something bigger than a property dispute." "How much bigger?" "Systematic corruption. He's using HOA positions to funnel development contracts to his own company. That's fraud. Multiple counts, potentially federal if he's crossing state lines or using mail systems." The next morning, I found a new surprise in my mailbox. Not an HOA violation, a cease and desist letter from Pemberton Development Group's attorney demanding I stop defamatory statements about their business practices and threatening a lawsuit for tortious interference with contract. But here's what Richard Pemberton didn't know about retired county surveyors. We're stubborn, we document everything, and we have really good relationships with investigative journalists. Time to make some phone calls. Amy Walsh from the Metro Herald had covered HOA corruption stories before. 3 Pulitzer nominations for investigative journalism, and a personal hatred of petty tyrants with clipboards. When I called her Thursday morning, she was interested immediately. Property theft through HOA manipulation? Marcus, this is exactly the kind of story that goes viral. Can you prove the boundary violation? GPS coordinates, original survey plats, photographic documentation. Plus, I found 17 other Pemberton development projects, all in communities where Richard sits on the HOA board. Holy shit, this isn't just theft, it's systemic fraud. We met Friday afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. I brought my entire evidence folder. Survey reports, permit applications with false boundary descriptions, the cease and desist letter, screenshots of Pemberton's social media posts attacking me. Amy's eyes got wider with each document. Marcus, this is incredible. Look at this pattern. He gets elected to HOA leadership, changes architectural guidelines to favor his projects, then uses his development company to capitalize on the changes. That's criminal conspiracy. Can you publish it? Can I publish it? Marcus, this story writes itself. HOA president steals neighbor's land for personal development project. It's got everything: corruption, bullying, David versus Goliath. Social media will eat this up. The article went live Sunday morning with the headline, HOA president built luxury addition on neighbor's property, then threatened foreclosure when caught. Amy had done her homework. Photos of the encroachment with clear measurement markers, copies of the threatening HOA violation notices, screenshots of Pemberton's social media posts, a sidebar explaining property law and homeowner rights. Most damaging, a list of all 17 Pemberton development projects, with dates showing when Richard joined each HOA board. The story exploded. By noon, it had 15,000 shares on Facebook. The neighborhood social media group where Pemberton had posted his edited video of me was flooded with comments supporting my position. This is why I hate HOAs. Property theft should be prosecuted criminally. Someone needs to investigate all his other projects. My phone started ringing. Neighbors I'd never met, calling to apologize for believing Pemberton's version. 3 other Willowbrook residents admitted they'd had boundary disputes with HOA-approved projects but were too intimidated to fight. The Washingtons from next door knocked on my door Sunday evening. Marcus, we owe you an apology. We saw Richard's video and thought you were just being difficult. But after reading that newspaper article, Mrs. Washington shook her head. We measured our own property line where it meets the Pemberton's new fence from last year. It's 4 feet onto our land. 4 feet? Richard told us the fence was replacement, same location as the old one. We trusted him because he's HOA president. Now we realize he moved it when he thought we wouldn't notice. Mr. Washington handed me a folder. We documented everything this weekend. Photos, measurements, property records. Would your lawyer be interested? Monday morning brought more phone calls. A reporter from Channel 8 News wanted to interview me. The Metro County District Attorney's Office had received multiple complaints about Pemberton Development Group and was reviewing the matter. A private investigator working for other HOA fraud victims wanted to compare notes, but the best call came from Detective Rodriguez. Marcus, you need to see this. 3 more homeowners contacted our fraud division over the weekend. All Pemberton Development projects, all involving HOA-approved encroachments. The DA's opening a criminal investigation. Criminal charges? Wire fraud, conspiracy, theft by conversion. If this pattern holds across multiple communities, we're looking at federal charges. You just brought down a criminal enterprise. That afternoon, Richard Pemberton's addition was half finished. Roof trusses up, electrical rough-in complete. Beautiful work that was about to become evidence in a criminal case. But I wasn't done yet. Sarah Tatum had filed our legal response, and it was going to change everything. Sarah Tatum called me Tuesday morning, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Marcus, I've been researching accession law all weekend. What Pemberton's done isn't just trespass. It's the legal equivalent of gift-wrapping his addition and handing you the deed. Explain that again? Texas property code is very clear about improvements built on someone else's land. If the improvements are substantial, permanent, and removing them would cause economic waste, the landowner can elect to keep them, no compensation to the builder. I drove to her office immediately. Sarah had law books spread across every surface, yellow sticky notes marking relevant cases. Here's the precedent. Johnson v. Riverside HOA 2019. Almost identical facts. HOA president approved construction that encroached on neighbor's property. Court awarded the entire structure to the landowner, valued at $145,000. Builder got nothing. Pemberton's addition is worth more than that. Current construction value is about $180,000, yes. But here's the beautiful part. We're not suing for damages or asking him to move the structure. We're filing a claim for legal ownership of the entire addition. She showed me the legal filing. Petition for quiet title and award of improvements under doctrine of accession. Sarah, can we actually win this? Marcus, we've already won. The law is crystal clear, the boundary violation is documented with GPS precision, and Pemberton built permanent improvements knowing he was on your land. Any judge who understands property law will award you ownership. What about his permits and HOA approval? Irrelevant. You can't permit someone to build on land you don't own. The city approvals are based on false boundary information that Pemberton provided. The HOA approval is meaningless because HOAs can't authorize trespass. We filed the petition Wednesday morning. Sarah hand-delivered copies to Pemberton's attorney and the construction company. I wanted them to know exactly what was coming. The reaction was immediate. Pemberton called my house at 8 p.m., screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You cannot steal my addition. I have $180,000 invested in that project. Richard, you built it on my land without permission. Texas law is very clear about the consequences. This is extortion. Theft. I'll have you arrested." Actually, the theft was when you built on my property. I'm just claiming what's legally mine under accession doctrine. Accession doctrine? You can't just make up legal terms? I read him the relevant statute. When improvements are made to real property by one who is not the owner thereof, the owner of the property may elect to acquire ownership of such improvements. Long silence. Then, this is insane. No court would award you my addition. Johnson versus Riverside HOA says otherwise. 2019 case. Almost identical facts. Builder lost everything. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, calculating instead of angry. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Nothing. I want exactly what the law says I'm entitled to. Ownership of improvements built on my property. Be reasonable. I'll pay you for the land value. Fair market price plus damages. We can resolve this without involving the courts." "Richard, you spent months threatening me with foreclosure, calling me mentally unstable, posting videos to humiliate me. You had multiple opportunities to resolve this reasonably. Now we do this the legal way." Thursday morning, I watched his construction crew standing around looking confused. No work was happening. The project was dead in the water while lawyers sorted out who owned what. Janet Pemberton showed up at my door around noon, tears in her eyes. "Marcus, please. That addition is our retirement dream. We've saved for 5 years to afford it. Richard made a mistake with the property lines, but we can fix this." "Janet, your husband didn't make a mistake. He deliberately built on my land, then tried to bully me into accepting it. This is the consequence. But the legal fees alone will bankrupt us. Richard's development company is already under criminal investigation. If we lose the addition too..." I felt a moment of sympathy. Janet wasn't the villain here. She'd just married one. "Janet, I'm sorry this affects you, but I didn't create this situation. What if we deed you equivalent land from our backyard? Same square footage, fair trade? Your backyard isn't worth $180,000 in construction improvements." She left crying. Friday afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called with an update on the criminal investigation. "Marcus, Pemberton Development Group has been running this scam for at least 7 years. Systematic fraud across multiple communities. The DA is preparing charges on 16 separate cases of theft by conversion." What does that mean for my case? Means Pemberton's going to be too busy avoiding prison to fight your property claim. His lawyer called the DA's office asking about plea bargains. Man's looking at 5 to 10 years if this goes to trial. Saturday morning, I walked into my backyard and looked at Pemberton's half-finished addition sitting on my land. Beautiful craftsmanship, premium materials, professional work. In 2 weeks, I'd gone from planting tomatoes to potentially owning a $180,000 luxury addition. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people finish digging their own graves. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, November 7th at 9 a.m. in Judge Martinez's courtroom. Sarah Tatum had warned me that accession cases usually took months to resolve, but the criminal investigation into Pemberton Development Group had fast-tracked everything. The DA's office wanted civil matters settled before criminal proceedings began. I arrived early, carrying a banker's box full of evidence. Survey reports, GPS coordinates, original subdivision plats, photographs documenting the encroachment. 30 years of professional surveying had taught me that cases are won with documentation, not drama. Pemberton's legal team filled an entire row, 3 attorneys in expensive suits, briefcases that probably cost more than my monthly pension. David Tatum, the lawyer who'd originally threatened me, looked like he'd aged 5 years and 2 months. The criminal investigation was taking its toll. Richard and Janet Pemberton sat behind their attorneys. Richard wore his most expensive suit, the one he'd worn to city council meetings when lobbying for development approvals. But his usual confident swagger was gone. The man who'd threatened to foreclose on my house looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Judge Martinez called the court to order at exactly 9 a.m. Case number 2024 CV 3847, Holbrook v. Pemberton, petition for quiet title and award of improvements under doctrine of accession. Sarah Tatum stood to present our case. She'd prepared a visual presentation, aerial photographs of the properties, survey overlays showing the exact encroachment, timeline of construction activities. Your Honor, this is a straightforward application of Texas Property Code Section 23.102. The defendant built permanent improvements on plaintiff's property without permission, knowing the construction violated established boundary lines. She clicked to the first exhibit, my professional survey with GPS coordinates. Mr. Holbrook is a retired county surveyor with 30 years of experience. His boundary documentation shows defendant's addition extends 12 feet onto plaintiff's property, encompassing 288 square feet of land valued at approximately $50,000. David Tatum objected. Your Honor, plaintiff's survey is informal and conducted without proper certification. Overruled. Mr. Holbrook's credentials speak for themselves. Sarah continued. The defendant had multiple opportunities to verify boundaries before construction. Instead, he provided false information to the city planning department, claiming the addition would be built entirely on his own property. She displayed copies of Pemberton's permit applications, highlighting the incorrect property descriptions. Furthermore, defendant used his position as HOA president to approve his own construction project, creating a conflict of interest that enabled this violation. Judge Martinez studied the documents. Mr. Tatum, how does your client respond to these boundary measurements? David Tatum looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client relied on city-approved permits and professional contractor assessments. Any boundary discrepancy was unintentional. Mr. Tatum. The judge's voice carried a warning. Are you arguing that your client accidentally built 12 feet onto his neighbor's property? We're arguing that modern development practices and municipal approval processes supersede individual property interpretations. Mr. Tatum, stop. Judge Martinez removed his glasses. Property lines aren't interpretations. They're legal boundaries established by recorded survey. Either your client built on his own land or he didn't. Which is it? Long pause. Your Honor, we acknowledge there may be minor boundary discrepancies, but defendant invested $180,000 in good faith improvements. Awarding the entire structure to plaintiff would constitute unjust enrichment. Objection. Sarah Tatum was on her feet. Texas precedent is clear on this point. Johnson vs. Riverside HOA 2019. When improvements are built on another's land without permission, unjust enrichment applies to the builder, not the landowner. The judge nodded. I'm familiar with Johnson. Similar facts, clear precedent. David Tatum tried again. Your Honor, defendant is willing to compensate plaintiff for land value plus reasonable damages. We propose a settlement of $75,000 to resolve this matter equitably. Mr. Tatum, your client had months to propose equitable settlements. Instead, he threatened foreclosure proceedings against the plaintiff for documenting the violation. This court will apply the law as written. I watched Richard Pemberton's face turn pale. His attorney was throwing Hail Mary passes, but Judge Martinez clearly understood the legal issues. Sarah Tatum presented our final argument. Your Honor, Texas Property Code Section 23.102 states that when permanent improvements are made on another's land, the landowner may elect to acquire ownership of such improvements. The statute exists specifically to prevent situations like this, where builders attempt to strong-arm landowners into accepting encroachments. The improvements in question are substantial, $180,000 in construction value. Removing them would constitute economic waste. Defendant built with full knowledge of the boundary violation, as evidenced by his attempts to intimidate plaintiff into accepting the encroachment. She paused for effect. Plaintiff elects to acquire ownership of the improvements under accession doctrine. Judge Martinez reviewed his notes for several minutes. The courtroom was dead silent except for the scratch of his pen and the nervous shuffle of Pemberton's legal team. Finally, he looked up. This case presents a clear application of well-established property law. The evidence shows defendant built permanent improvements 12 feet onto plaintiff's property without permission. The boundary violation is documented with professional precision. Defendant's permits are based on false property descriptions that he provided to municipal authorities. Richard Pemberton gripped the table in front of him. Furthermore, defendant's conduct after the violation was discovered, threatening foreclosure, filing frivolous HOA violations, attempting to intimidate plaintiff into accepting the encroachment, demonstrates willful disregard for property rights. The judge paused, looking directly at Pemberton. Texas law provides clear remedies for this situation. Property Code Section 23.102 allows landowners to acquire improvements built on their land without permission. Johnson v. Riverside HOA provides directly applicable precedent. Janet Pemberton started crying quietly. Therefore, this court awards plaintiff Marcus Holbrook full ownership of the residential addition constructed on his property, including all fixtures, improvements, and attached structures. Current construction value is stipulated at $180,000. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but I could see David Tatum frantically writing notes. Additionally, defendant shall pay plaintiff's attorney fees and court costs in the amount of $47,000, as provided under Property Code Section 5.062 for successful boundary dispute litigation. The gavel hit the bench like a gunshot. Mr. Holbrook, you are hereby awarded full permanent ownership of the $180,000 luxury residential addition built without permission on your property, plus $47,000 in attorney fees and court costs payable immediately by the defendants. Dead silence. Then Richard Pemberton turned the color of printer paper. His wife let out a choked sob when she realized their brand-new custom kitchen, the one with the $18,000 Italian marble island and the built-in Mealy espresso bar, now legally belonged to the crazy old man they'd spent 8 months trying to bully out of the neighborhood. The court clerk stamped my updated deed. Thunk! The sound hit harder than the gavel. Pemberton tried to stand. His knees buckled. He collapsed straight to the floor, right between the tables, gasping like a fish while his lawyer frantically fanned him with a legal folder. His wife was screaming my name through hysterical tears, as if I were the villain here. 8 months of fake violations, threats, and lies ended with me owning their dream addition and them owing me a check most people don't make in a year. Turns out the quickest way to get a free luxury kitchen remodel is to let your HOA president teach you a lesson about property lines. I walked out smiling, keys to their masterpiece already in my hand. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I stood in what was now legally my addition, watching contractors install the finishing touches. Premium hardwood floors, custom cabinetry, stainless steel appliances that cost more than my first car. Richard Pemberton had built me the retirement gift I never knew I wanted. But keeping a $180,000 addition as a trophy felt wrong. Linda always said the best victories are the ones that help other people. That's when I got the idea. I called a community meeting for Saturday afternoon. Not an HOA meeting, but a real neighborhood gathering in my backyard. 23 families showed up, including the Washingtons, Detective Rodriguez, and several residents I'd never met who'd been following the story through Amy Walsh's newspaper coverage. Folks, I want to talk about what we do with this addition. I gestured to the completed structure behind me. It's beautiful work, professionally built, and it's sitting on my property whether I wanted it or not. Mrs. Washington raised her hand. Marcus, you earned that addition. Richard Pemberton tried to steal your land and bully you into accepting it. That's true. But here's the thing. I'm 61 years old, living alone in a 3-bedroom house. I don't need a luxury outdoor kitchen with a $15,000 wine refrigerator. Mike Rodriguez leaned forward. What are you thinking? Community meeting space. Willowbrook Estates has 43 families and no common area except the HOA president's living room. We could use this for neighborhood gatherings, holiday parties, emergency meetings during power outages. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Lisa Tatum, no relation to Pemberton's lawyer, volunteered to coordinate a holiday potluck. The Washingtons offered to maintain the landscaping. 3 families with teenagers suggested using the space for graduation parties. There's more. I pulled out a folder Sarah Tatum had helped me prepare. The court awarded me $47,000 in attorney fees from Pemberton. I don't need that money either. I explained my idea. The Willowbrook Estates Educational Fund. Local high school students pursuing careers in surveying, engineering, or law could apply for scholarships funded by the settlement money. The first $47,000 would be seed money, but we could fundraise for additional awards. Richard Pemberton tried to use his HOA position to steal land and intimidate neighbors. Let's turn his legal fees into something that actually helps young people build better futures. The vote was unanimous. By December, the transformation was remarkable. The addition had become the heart of neighborhood life. We'd hosted 3 community meetings, a Thanksgiving potluck for 37 people, and planning sessions for next year's 4th of July block party. The outdoor kitchen got regular use, families borrowing the space for birthday celebrations, weekend barbecues, even a wedding anniversary party. The scholarship fund was growing too. Amy Walsh's follow-up articles about the community transformation had brought donations from across Metro County. Local businesses contributed gift cards for fundraising raffles. The first scholarship awards would go out in spring, $5,000 each for 3 students. Richard Pemberton had resigned from the HOA board the day after the court ruling. A criminal plea agreement kept him out of prison, but his development company was finished. The house next door went up for sale in January. Apparently, the Pembertons were relocating somewhere their reputation hadn't preceded them. Janet Pemberton stopped by one afternoon in February, looking exhausted, but no longer hostile. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I knew Richard was cutting corners on some projects, but I didn't realize how bad it was until the DA showed us the evidence." "Janet, I'm sorry this affected your family." "You have nothing to apologize for. Richard made his choices." She looked at the addition, now decorated with community meeting schedules and scholarship fund information. "I'm glad something good came out of this mess." The new HOA board was a different animal entirely. Detective Rodriguez agreed to serve as president. Nobody was going to try corruption schemes on a cop. Mrs. Washington became secretary. The first new policy eliminated conflict of interest approvals and required independent surveying for any construction project within 10 feet of property boundaries. Spring brought the first scholarship awards. 3 local students received $5,000 each. Maria Santos, planning to study civil engineering, James Kim, accepted to law school, and Ashley Rodriguez, Mike's daughter, pursuing a degree in environmental science. The ceremony was held in the addition with the whole neighborhood attending. Watching those kids accept scholarships funded by their community felt better than any legal victory. 6 months ago, I'd been a retired surveyor trying to plant tomatoes. Richard Pemberton's greed and arrogance had turned that simple goal into a legal war. But sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's building something beautiful on the ruins of their schemes. The addition still had that wine refrigerator Richard had been so proud of. We used it to store sodas for community meetings and sparkling cider for scholarship celebrations. Every time I opened it, I smiled. Turns out stolen land makes excellent foundation for legitimate community building. 1 year later, I was back in my garden planting tomatoes, the same project that started this whole adventure. But now I had help. The Willowbrook Estates community garden had grown into a neighborhood tradition, with families contributing vegetables that we shared through the addition's outdoor kitchen. Richard Pemberton was ancient history. The new owners of his house were a young couple with twin toddlers who actually waved when they saw neighbors. The contrast was remarkable. The scholarship fund had awarded $25,000 to 8 students over 2 semesters. Maria Santos sent updates from engineering school. James Kim was clerking for a property law firm, planning to specialize in HOA disputes. Ashley Rodriguez was designing sustainable communities for her senior project. But the real victory was subtler. Willowbrook Estates had transformed from a place where one bully controlled 43 families into an actual community where neighbors knew each other's names. The addition hosted something almost every weekend: birthday parties, game nights, planning meetings for the annual block party. Detective Rodriguez, still HOA president, had instituted monthly coffee and complaints sessions where residents could discuss issues without formal proceedings or violation notices. Amazing how many problems disappeared when people talked instead of threatening each other. Every morning I walked past the addition and remembered Richard Pemberton's threat. Trust the professionals and let progress happen. He was right about progress, just wrong about who would benefit from it. Sometimes the best way to stop a bully is to let them build your victory for you. Have you ever dealt with HOA overreach or boundary disputes? Share your story below. You might be surprised what legal options you have.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.